Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about context in SAP CPI. So we're going to look at what is a context and how can you see the context in SAP CPI? How can you manipulate a context by using node functions? And how can you implement a simple mapping to convert a source structure into target structure by using node functions? I will show you some of the examples of node functions and I'll explain how can you use these node functions to manipulate the context to derive the right target structure. So without further delay, let's begin. In SAP CPI graphical mapping, context refers to the hierarchical grouping of XML elements during message mapping. Understanding context is crucial for how source and target elements are processed and mapped, especially when handling repeated structures or nested nodes. Let me explain this context by using simple XML structure. For example, you're receiving this XML from a source system. So it has orders, that is a parent node. Under the orders, we have two orders, right? Order 1 and order 2. So if you put this XML structure from a SAP CPI context perspective, it has two contexts. Context 1 for order 1, context 2 for order 2. And the items apple and banana are scoped under order 1, which is context 1, and the item orange is scoped under order 2, which is the context 2. So basically what SAP CPI does is SAP CPI converts this XML structure into a context format so that it knows whether apple, the item apple belongs to order 1 or order 2 or orange belongs to order 1 or order 2, right? So this is how the SAP uses intelligently this context inside the graphical mapping. If you want to convert this XML structure into a defined or a predefined target structure, you can use context handling by using different node functions. You can convert that into a target structure. In the following video, I'll take an example of a source structure. I'll try to convert that into a target structure by manipulating this context. Okay, now let me walk you through the demo. So in this demo, I'm going to show you how you can implement this mapping request, what we have, and how you can look at different queues and context in SAP CPI. And I'll also show you how you can use different node functions that you will be using in this demo to manipulate the context to produce the target required structure. So without further delay, let's begin. So before I begin, I would like to explain the requirement briefly. So imagine you're working on integration where you're integrating a HR system with your SAP CPI and you're sending this HR employee data to the target system. And to start with, you have a source structure that is coming in from the source system. So in this demo, we are using graphical mapping. So basically, we assume that you have the source data coming in XML format. And you have this, for example, given source structure, you have employees data coming in as a inbound structure. And as you can see in this diagram, so you have employees, that is the parent node of your message. And under employees, you have multiple and number of employees, employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this simple example. And each employee has three nodes. They are employee name, ID, and department. So this is very simple and one level or two level hierarchical structure. And now the request is that you need to translate the source structure into a target structure. So let's quickly look at the target structure. As you can see here, this target structure is based on the departments, where the source structure is based on the employee, right? So you are translating that into department specific structure where you have the top node departments as the parent node, and under the departments you can have a number of departments based on the employees coming in, and every department has a department name, and under department you have a substructure that is employee structure, and under the employee you have name and an ID of the employee. So this is, I would say, a simple mapping. It's not very complex mapping. You're just translating a source definition to target definition, and not without filtering, sorting, or grouping and so on. It is a pretty straightforward mapping. So what I'm going to do is, so I'm going to explain you how we can create a graphical mapping in SAP CPI for this requirement, and how we can use different node functions. For example, we're going to use multiple node functions to manipulate the context, I'm going to explain you how we can see the context by using display queue functionality in SAP CPI, and eventually how you can test the mapping by giving a sample input XML. So we're going to briefly look at all these topics here. As always, the material that is necessary or I used in this demo or in GitHub. So the link is in the description. You go there and download this material, and you can follow my instructions to practice yourself. Okay, it's pretty straightforward and easy. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a graphical mapping in SAP CPI. Okay, let's start with that. So this is my test package, and I'm going to add a message mapping here. So I'm just going to name it as test graphical mapping. You can give a description, it's not mandatory, and click on add and open in editor. Okay, it's going to open my graphical mapping editor in SAP CPI. Okay, so this is a graphical editor, and click on edit to edit this graphical mapping. So let me minimize this here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the structures that are necessary. I'm going to add both input structure, input XSD and output XSD. So here you have employee input XSD, which is my source structure. And I'm also going to upload my target structure, which is employee output XSD. So click on employee output XSD and click on add. So after I added these two structures, I'm going to map these structures as my source and target structures. Okay. So you're going to do like click on this add source structure, source message. I'm going to select the input here, and I'm going to do the same thing for target message. Click on the output here. So now you have the source and target structures loaded, right? And as you can see here, the target structures are in red color. Red is danger, which means that red color indicates they're mandatory. So they have the occurrence 1 to 1. 1 to 1 means they're mandatory fields, and you have to populate or pass some values to these nodes. Otherwise, the mapping is going to fail. So that is the indication of the red color. Red is dangerous. Okay. If you don't want to keep them as mandatory or red color, make them as optional. Occurrence as 1 to 0, not 1 to 1. But here, for example, have kept all the target elements as 1 to 1, just to keep it a bit hard for you. Okay. Now I'm going to map the employee to departments. You can also put a static value. It doesn't matter because there is a 1 to 1 occurrence. Now I'm going to map the department to the department node, department parent node. Why? Because I want to repeat for each and every department I'm getting from source. I want to create one target department structure. That is the reason why I mapped it like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the default mapping line here. Okay. I'm going to use one very interesting node function, which is very popular in node functions, which is remove context. Okay. I will show you, or maybe I'll explain what is this remove context, what it does do by using display queues. But for now, remove context will simply remove the context between the nodes. It will put all the nodes under one scope. Okay, just remember that. That is the purpose of the remove context. Okay. So ideally what you need to do is you always need to map the parent nodes than the child nodes. So that's why I'm going to map the employee parent node here again. Okay. Then later on I will handle the remaining child nodes. Okay. I just mapped a department to employee here. Okay. It's pretty simple mapping here. So now the interesting fun part, right? Now I'm going to map the names, the department name first. Let me start with that. So I'm going to map the department name to the department name of the target structure. This is going to be tricky. And let's let's look into this detail. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another map node functions called exists. Okay. So I'm going to map exist input to the department, and I'm going to use one more function, which is if s without else. That is a function I'm going to use. So if s without else, yes. So this is I'm going to use here. Let me drag and drop, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to map the exists output to the condition value. Either it can be true or false, because that is a condition value. I'm going to map the department name to the true value. If it is true, pass the value of department as output to the if else without else, and which will actually map it to the name. Okay, I'm going to explain why I use these two functions later on, but remember the exist function is used for checking if if the node exists in target structure or not. If else without else is a condition, if it's just like if else condition. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of the two nodes, which is name, and employee ID. So as a simple method, you don't need to create the mapping again. You can simply copy the expression from the existing mapping, click on the three dots, copy the expression, and okay, something, let me save it. Okay, now yeah, paste it here. It will paste the whole expression. Then you just replace the nodes. Okay, so I'm going to replace the department node with the name node because I need to map the employee name with the employee name. Okay, so now I'm going to pass the name here as a true value, and I'm going to map the output out to the name here. Okay, I'm just going to repeat the same thing for the ID as well because it is the same expression, right? For example, you created the parent node and you need to use the same context for the all the child nodes, which means you use the same mapping expression for the department name, and employee ID. I'm just going to do that by copying and pasting the expressions, right? So now I'm going to repeat the same thing. Let me save it quickly. Okay, now I have ID here. So let me drag and drop ID, employee ID to employee ID. Then I'm going to delete the default mapping that SAP CPI adds, right? So now, so I mapped ID to the ID here, like I did it for name. Very simple, right? So I just mapped all the fields. As you can see, there's no red color on the target side, which means all the mandatory fields are mapped. So we're good to go and we're good to test. So it's very simple. As I said, it's a simple mapping. Okay. So let me go to the simulate section where I can test the mapping here. And I'm going to use a sample XML from the GitHub. Click on the sample input and click on open. And I'm going to click on the test button, which is actually creating the target structure. And let's see what happens now. Fingers crossed. Now, okay, hooray. So we have the department's target structure. And as you can see, this is exactly what I wanted to have, right? So I want to convert the employee specific structure into a department specific structure. And I want to repeat all the departments based on the number of employee departments. And I need to map the employee details to the department. So perfectly done. And this is what I expected, right? And now I would I'm going to explain briefly, right? For example, why we used different node functions and how can you check the context, how can you manipulate them. Let's look at them, okay? Oh, wrong click, sorry. Okay, close. Now, let's look at, for example, let me start with, this is nothing, right? This is one-to-one mapping. There's nothing, no context here. But now let me go to the departments node. As you can see here, this is a magic, right? And this is where the really magic happens. Let me explain what happens here. So let me drag this a bit. All right. So you can use or you can visualize the context by using this display queue function. Okay, click on display queue. It will actually show the internal arrangement of the context. For example, this is how SAP CPI sees context internally for a given structure. Okay, so let me do the same thing for all the three steps so that I can explain in detail what's happening in the background or in the behind the scenes. Okay, this is very interesting. This is it's science. Okay, now so we have three queues here, Q1, Q2, Q3 for three steps. And you see there are different colors, the gray color and white color. You might be wondering what are those, what they represent. So let me explain that briefly, shortly to you. Okay, now here, okay, now, perfect. So the white color actually indicates the actual value of the node. Okay, the gray color is nothing but the context and or a switch. Basically, it is switching between two different nodes. For example, or let me also put this numbering. Okay, you can also use numbering serial number 0 to some number. So basically, it indicates the gray indicates beginning of the context, the white indicates the actual value, end of the context, value, end of the context, value, end of the context. The white is the value and gray is the end of the context, and white is the value and gray is the end of the context. So the gray indicates the end of the context. The white value actually the value in the given scope that is coming in input. Okay. Now if you look at the remove context, what it does, it actually removed all the context breaks and it mapped all the values under one context. So which means HR finance IT, they all come under one context now. So there are 5 values under one context. Okay. The same values have been mapped to the target department node because the requirement is I need to repeat the department structure for every value of the department, right? So that's why I used remove context to map the one value for every department node, which means in the target structure it will generate 5 nodes, one for HR finance IT. So that is the purpose of this remove context. This is how I removed the context and I eventually produced the target department nodes. Okay. Let me also explain the other fields. Okay. Maybe let me start with this employee name. Okay. Here I have used exists and if else without else. Let me display the queue here. Then you understand better. Okay. Let me start with department. That is our source node. Sorry. Then let me do it for exists. Then if else without else. Yes. Now you see what happens. So you're getting 5 values, HR finance and HR finance, and for each value, because the node exists in the source structure, the exist produced true because there is a value, there is a node there, that's why it is true. If there is no value, it will say false. Okay. Then because the value is true, it took the value of the employee name because we passed the employee name to the true value, right? That's why John Smith, Alice Johnson, Robert, and Emily, and Mikhail, right? These values are mapped based on the context. It's straight context mapping. The context mapped equally, right? So from the source to the target. So that's how the name values are generated for every context change. Okay, that's how we use exist function to check if the node exists or not. We use if s without else as a conditional node function. Okay. Similarly, the ID the same thing. There is no brainer, so we use the same expression in the ID, so it just mapped the same values as well. And similarly for employees, right? For example, so we mapped the employee as well, like that, right? So let me do the same thing. Yes, this is the name, and I did the same expression for ID as well. Yes. So we have. So that is how you need to look at the queues and understand the context, then use different node functions to manipulate it, right? As you can see here, department, all the values are populated. If you pass 10 employees, it will generate 10 departments. If you pass one employee, it will pass one department. So it in relation to the source structure. That's how the context works. Okay. And I know when you watch a video or read a book or read a blog, the node functions, they sound pretty easy and simple to implement, but when you implement the node functions, sometimes they can get really tricky and they're very confusing if you don't have the foundation, right? So try to learn the foundation, understand what is the purpose of a node function, what it does, and then practice by using sample XMLs. Try to use different combination of node function and see how the value is produced on the target side, and take some examples or some exercises, and then see how we can implement those mappings by using node functions. Unless or until you practice node functions, they're not going to get easy for you or for anybody, because for some people they're rocket science. They're very confusing initially, but once you practice, you get to some level you feel so comfortable and you master it so easily, you can implement any kind of mapping. Okay, and my expertise or my experience says that if the mapping is simple or medium complex, then go for graphical mapping. If the mapping is super complex, forget it. Okay, don't use graphical mapping because they're difficult to implement, they're difficult to maintain, or they're difficult to hand it over to the next person. Because if you implement a massive graphical mapping, if you leave the company and if somebody takes it over, then for that guy, I mean, God save him. Okay, so don't do that. And if it is really simple or medium complex, go for graphical mapping. I strongly recommend that. If it is anything above medium complex, really complex, and go for Groovy scripting. Groovy scripting is beautiful and it is really powerful, and I love this the language. You can really do a lot of things, and it's no brainer. Just write some lines of code and the output is there. This is what I advise. That being said, I'm going to continue producing different node functions videos, and as well as some Groovy scripting videos as well in coming days or coming weeks or months. If you have any comments, or if you have any doubts or requirements, please leave some comment in the comment section below. As always, this content is free, and if you like the video, consider sharing the video to your friends and giving a like or subscribe to my channel. And thank you for sticking with me, and thank you for all the messages in the LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube. I really appreciate that. I'm striving hard to produce this content, but no, I will be more disciplined. I mean, I'll try to spend more time on this content creation in coming weeks, and I hope I will be able to help in giving you the right content, whatever you need. And as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And if you like the video, always consider giving a like, share the video, and subscribe to my channel. And thank you for watching.